the capital of the United States, a city of marble and monuments, but also of shadows. Every night, tens of thousands live unseen, under bridges, in shelters, behind the city's polished facade. Among them, one little girl's story would shake Washington to its core. Her name was Relisha Rudd. Her disappearance wasn't just another missing child case. It was a reflection of something deeper, a system stretched thin, a city that looked away, and a silence that still lingers. It was March 2014. Washington, D.C. was gearing up for spring, cherry blossoms about to bloom. But a few miles from the tidal basin, in a cold concrete complex that used to be a hospital, hundreds of families struggled to survive another night. The building was called D.C. General Family Shelter, once a medical facility, now converted into the city's largest homeless shelter. Its halls echoed with crying babies, rolling luggage, and the hum of fluorescent lights that never turned off. This was where Relisha lived with her mother, Shamika Young, and her 3 younger brothers, 4 children sharing a single cramped room, their lives measured by curfews, cafeteria mealtimes, and shelter rules. Relisha Tenno Rudd, born October 29, 2005, was bright, artistic, with a love of color and sparkle. Teachers said she adored arts and crafts, often staying behind after class to draw. Friends said she was kind, shy, and always trying to help younger kids. At just 8 years old, she already carried a maturity beyond her age, a quiet awareness of the instability around her. For Relisha, the world was a mix of chaos and imagination. At school, she was known for her laughter. At home, she learned to be cautious, to adapt to noise, strangers, and rules that changed day to day. D.C. General wasn't meant to hold hundreds of families for years, but by 2014, it had become the last stop for many. Over 270 children lived there. The walls told stories of exhaustion, resilience, and fear. Residents complained of broken locks, infestations, unsafe conditions. The shelter sat isolated on the edge of the city, fenced in, out of sight, and yet for families like the Rudds, it was all they had. Inside that window, an 8-year-old tried to hold on to normal childhood dreams. D.C. General was run by the city's Department of Human Services, underfunded, overwhelmed, and often understaffed. Social workers juggled hundreds of cases. The shelter had only a handful of staff monitoring hundreds of residents. Oversight reports later revealed systemic failures, poor background checks, missing records, and inadequate safety training. But in 2014, those failures were still invisible until Relisha disappeared. When the system is stretched thin, danger doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it walks right through the front door, unnoticed. Among the staff was a janitor named Khalil Tatum. To most, he seemed helpful, polite, trustworthy, but to at least one family he became something more. Tatum would soon enter Relisha's life, offering small gifts, affection, and the promise of care. To a struggling mother trying to make ends meet, those gestures felt like kindness. To investigators later, they would look like grooming. In just a few weeks, Relisha Rudd would vanish, quietly, completely, and the city would realize that even in a building full of people, a child can disappear without anyone noticing. What happened to Relisha Rudd? Who failed her, and how did the cracks of bureaucracy, poverty, and misplaced trust swallow her whole? To answer that, we have to go back inside D.C. General and follow the trail of a little girl who trusted the wrong man. Morning came early inside D.C. General. The lights never truly went out, only dimmed. At 6 a.m., the building stirred. Footsteps, crying, the clang of breakfast trays. For hundreds of children, this was home. And for one girl, the thin line between safety and danger was already fraying. Daily life at D.C. General followed a strict rhythm. Families lined up for food, signed attendance sheets, and passed through security each time they came or went. The shelter sat on the edge of southeast D.C., close enough to downtown to glimpse the Capitol dome, but far enough that it might as well have been another world. Mothers like Shamika Young were required to meet case managers, check in with curfew, and attend mandatory meetings. Children adapted. They played in narrow hallways, made friends, created normalcy from chaos. Relisha loved to draw on napkins or braid her doll's hair while humming songs she'd heard at school. To her brothers, she was a protector, the big sister who made the shelter feel less frightening. Relisha's mother, Shamika, had struggled for years balancing survival, unemployment, and motherhood inside a system that offered too little help. She had applied for housing assistance, attended programs, but progress was slow. Every missed appointment, every paperwork delay meant more time trapped in that shelter. In those conditions, small gestures, a neighbor's help, a staff member's kindness, could mean everything. And that's how Khalil Tatum began to blend into their lives. Khalil Malik Tatum was one of several janitors employed by a private contractor working with the shelter. To residents, he appeared helpful, a man who went beyond his job. He carried toys in his work cart, brought food for families who missed meals, and often gave children small gifts, a toy, a tablet, a few dollars. To some, he was a friendly presence in a place that often felt cold. To others, something about his attention seemed off, but no one intervened. Tatum was in his early 50s with a criminal record, burglary, theft, but the background checks in place failed to flag him effectively. The system that hired him barely noticed who he was. Over the months, Tatum's bond with Relisha grew. He'd call her his little princess. He'd take her to events outside the shelter, the Disney on Ice show at the Verizon Center, a pool party, shopping trips. To a child like Relisha, those moments felt magical. To a mother under pressure, they felt like help, a man giving her daughter opportunities she couldn't afford. But behind those outings, there was no authorization, no written consent, no caseworker approval. A janitor had unfettered access to a child, and no one in the system stopped it. At Payne Elementary School, where Relisha was enrolled, teachers began noticing absences. Days turned to weeks, but each time they asked, they received the same explanation. Relisha was sick under the care of Dr. Tatum. The story sounded plausible. Tatum had posed as a doctor before. He even arranged fake phone calls to the school, impersonating a physician. No one had ever met this so-called doctor. But the paperwork passed, the excuses continued, and the silence grew longer. By February 2014, Relisha had missed more than 30 days of school. Teachers filed reports. The school social worker called the family. But miscommunication between agencies delayed any action. Inside the shelter, no one raised an alarm. Tatum was still seen daily, still trusted. Outside, life went on. The city prepared for spring, and in one of its most crowded shelters, a predator walked freely among children. In late February, Relisha left the shelter with Tatum and never returned. Her mother thought she was safe. Her teachers believed she was under care. But in truth, she was already gone. By late February 2014, winter was losing its grip on Washington. The cherry trees along the Potomac stood bare, waiting for spring. Inside D.C. General, the usual noise had dulled. Fewer children laughing, fewer footsteps echoing down the hall. Somewhere between the daily chaos and official indifference, a child slipped away unnoticed. 8-year-old Relisha Rudd, last seen alive on a hotel surveillance camera, walking beside the man her mother trusted. On February 26, 2014, security cameras at the Holiday Inn Express in Northeast D.C. recorded what investigators now call the beginning of the end. The footage shows Khalil Tatum and Relisha Rudd walking calmly down a long hallway. No sign of fear, no hesitation, just a little girl in boots and a coat, holding what appeared to be a plastic bag, perhaps toys, perhaps clothes. To anyone else, they looked like father and daughter. But Tatum was not her father, and that night, something shifted. That moment, captured in grainy pixels, remains the last confirmed moving image of Relisha alive. Between February 26th and March 1st, Relisha was seen at least once more, this time at a Days Inn along New York Avenue, Northeast D.C. Witnesses recall seeing her with Tatum. Hotel employees described her as quiet, reserved, never showing distress. But after that weekend, she was gone. Calls to her family went unanswered. The shelter didn't report her missing because technically her mother had allowed her to leave with Tatum. Days turned to weeks, a child missing, and no one knew. The city's bureaucratic chain of command, schools, social services, police, failed to connect the dots. Each agency assumed someone else was responsible. Even as Relisha vanished from school, calls kept coming. Dr. Tatum, the supposed physician treating her, phoned the school saying she was ill. The flu, pneumonia, a long recovery. The school staff grew uneasy. But each time, the voice on the other end sounded calm, professional, believable. It wasn't a doctor. It was Khalil Tatum himself, impersonating one. When the school counselor tried to meet this doctor face-to-face, he never showed up. By March 13, nearly 3 weeks after Relisha was last seen, her school contacted Child and Family Services. Caseworkers began asking questions. Where was the child? Who was this doctor? Why hadn't anyone seen her? On March 19th, authorities officially launched a missing child investigation. 18 days. That's how long it took for someone to sound the alarm. For a child her age, every hour mattered. For Relisha, those hours had slipped away in silence. Detectives raced to piece together the timeline. They discovered hotel records, surveillance footage, and a trail of receipts, all pointing to Tatum. On March 2nd, the day after Relisha's last confirmed sighting, Tatum visited a Home Depot in Prince George's County, Maryland. Surveillance footage captured him buying a shovel, large trash bags, and a container of quicklime, a substance often used to accelerate decomposition. Investigators would later call this the most chilling discovery in the timeline. By the time anyone realized what it meant, it was far too late. As word spread, Washington D.C. erupted in disbelief. Flyers went up across the city. Reporters swarmed the shelter. Police searched parks, motels, rivers, anywhere a child could be hidden. Relisha's image, her round face, her bright eyes, was suddenly everywhere. But every lead came too late. Khalil Tatum had vanished. In less than 3 weeks, a trusted janitor had disappeared with a child. And as investigators closed in, what they found next would darken the story forever. A body in a motel room, a gun, and still, no Relisha. March 20th, 2014. It had been 22 days since anyone last saw 8-year-old Relisha Rudd. That morning, a welfare check led officers to a motel in Prince George's County, Maryland, about a 30-minute drive from the shelter where Relisha once lived. Room 132, door closed, curtains drawn. Inside, police found a man, Khalil Tatum, dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound, but there was no sign of Relisha. In the room, detectives found a handgun, a Bible, hotel receipts, and personal items, some belonging to Tatum, some not. They found Relisha's family photographs inside his wallet, proof of a connection far deeper than a casual acquaintance. But there was no physical trace of the child herself, no clothing, no fingerprints, no DNA. It was as if she had been erased. Within hours, the search widened. Police, volunteers, and federal agents scoured parks, rivers, and abandoned buildings across D.C. and Maryland. The FBI joined the hunt, declaring Relisha Rudd an endangered missing child. Helicopters hovered over the Anacostia River. K-9 units searched along highways and motel corridors. But nothing, not a single confirmed sighting since February 26. Investigators traced Tatum's movements backward through surveillance footage. They discovered that in the days before his death, he had checked into multiple motels, often alone, sometimes under false names. One of those stays, at a different hotel near Oxon Hill, was captured on camera, showing him carrying large black trash bags to a dumpster behind the building. When police searched the dumpster, they found no body, only discarded cleaning supplies and bedding. Still, the images haunted investigators. It looked like a man disposing of something he could never explain. The same day Tatum was found dead, police discovered his wife, Andrea Tatum, shot and killed in a separate hotel room across town. Witnesses later said Khalil had appeared distraught in the days before. He told friends he had messed up and that his life was over. Investigators concluded he killed Andrea, then turned the gun on himself. 2 bodies, 2 hotels, 1 missing child, and no clear answers. Detectives explored every theory. Did Tatum kill Relisha before ending his life? Did he hand her off to someone else? Some believed he buried her body in one of the remote construction sites he once worked at. Others thought she might have been sold or trafficked. But no evidence, No witnesses, no confession, no remains ever confirmed any scenario. The case was both horrifying and hollow, all leads pointing to one man now dead, leaving behind only speculation. In the weeks that followed, city leaders faced outrage, parents demanded answers. Reporters asked how an employee with a criminal past gained unsupervised access to children inside a city shelter. Investigations revealed systemic negligence, unverified staff, communication breakdowns between the school system and child services, and a lack of accountability. For many, Relisha's disappearance wasn't just a tragedy. It was a mirror held up to a broken system. Months passed. The shelter where it all began, D.C. General, was eventually shut down, its hallways emptied, its doors locked for good. Volunteers still searched creeks and forests on weekends. Her photo stayed pinned to corkboards in police stations, but year after year, hope faded. The case remains open to this day. No arrests, no remains, no closure. The man who might have known what happened is gone. The evidence that could have spoken is missing, and an entire city is left with a name, a photo, and a haunting question that refuses to fade. Where is Relisha Rudd? When the search teams went home and the news cameras turned away, the silence settled in. A silence that stretched from D.C. General's empty hallways to the quiet corners of the city where posters of a missing girl slowly faded in the rain. Relisha Rudd's story didn't end in a headline. It ended in questions. In the years that followed, her name became a symbol, not just of a tragedy, but of everything that failed her. The shelter system that couldn't protect its children, the bureaucracy that lost track of an 8-year-old for almost a month, the city that looked away until it was too late. Her family grieved without answers. Her brothers grew up with the memory of a sister frozen in time, smiling from posters and old photographs, never older, never found. For them, the word missing became permanent. Community groups in Washington rallied. Every year, they held marches, vigils, and awareness events. They spoke Relisha's name out loud, a reminder that forgotten children still matter. Her disappearance led to reforms in how D.C. handles at-risk youth. Shelters began new background check systems. Schools tightened reporting procedures. Social workers got new training. But change came slowly and unevenly, because the deeper truth wasn't just about one missing girl. At the time of Relisha's disappearance, hundreds of children were living in shelters across the capital. Most were unseen, their stories unheard. Her case forced Washington to look directly at what it had ignored for years: poverty, homelessness, and the dangerous cracks in the system meant to protect. For many, Relisha wasn't just a missing child. She was a reflection of a society that doesn't always see its most vulnerable. Every March, her name trends again. People post her photo online, share the same question: where is Relisha? Neighborhood murals keep her image alive, painted in bright colors, with angel wings and smiles, surrounded by the words, "Never forget." In schools, teachers use her story as a lesson about awareness and vigilance, the importance of speaking up when something doesn't feel right. Her legacy became a message, not about fear, but about responsibility. One activist said, "Relisha's story is what happens when everyone thinks someone else is watching." Another said, "She is every child who slips through the cracks and every voice we fail to hear." The city renamed shelters, restructured agencies, but the shadow of D.C. General still lingers. The place that lost her, now demolished, stands as both a warning and a memorial. An empty space, where 1,000 stories ended and one never did. It's been over a decade now. No one has ever been charged. No trace has ever been found. The case remains open, and her face, still on the missing persons registry, reminds everyone how easily a child can disappear in plain sight. Some nights, locals say they still see her posters in forgotten corners of the city. Torn, faded, but still there. Relisha Rudd was 8 years old. She loved the color pink. She wanted to be a teacher. And somewhere between the shelter's walls and the city's blind spots, her story vanished. But her name still echoes. In every effort to protect the next child, in every law rewritten, and in every parent who watches more closely now. If you're intrigued by unsolved mysteries and chilling cases, check out my playlist, True Crime, Murders, and Disappearances, for more unsolved cases.